So Mark kind of hit some of the highlights already here. You know, we basically had opened 7 restaurants in 5 years. We no longer have them. We sold them off in December. And at peak, Mark kind of hit that fact that we had over 400 employees. And these weren't just restaurant level employees. I mean, we had 25 plus managers who were making somewhere between $30,000 to $90,000 a year. So I mean, people who could definitely sustain living on, as a full-time job doing this. And annually, we're responsible for compensating about $4.5 million worth of compensation. At our peak, as kind of mentioned, we served over 1 million guests per year, and that equates to about a $12 million per year run rate that we created within 5 years. And our strongest restaurant, which probably a lot of you guys have been to up in Appleton, averaged at peak about 660 guest visits per day. And the peak week that it ever served was over 6,000 guests, which basically equates to about 1 out of every 35 people in 5 cities basically would have visited the restaurant that week. And we were big on giving back to communities, and I pointed out at peak there we had given out about $125,000 in 1 year in cash donations back to our communities. To just give you a quick highlight of our company, we had 7 core values here, and we came up with this video. So I'll show this to you and then go through our kind of the history of it. So along the way, we basically had come up with 7 different core values and a mantra, making impacts. And basically, our thought as a company is that we wanted to make positive impacts on the communities that we were in. And basically, as an employer, I felt it was my duty to make a positive impact on every single one of our employees. Our employees were supposed to make a positive impact on all of our guests, and basically together we were supposed to make a positive impact on the community. And basically, with those core values were items that we came up with that would help us stay focused. And basically, a guide that we would use those 7 different things for every single major decision that we made within our company. I guess when you look at our company, looking backwards, it seems all great, but it definitely wasn't an easy path getting there. I had actually graduated college with a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering technology back in '99. And right after I graduated, my grandfather passed away. And he, with the inheritance, my brother and sister, we bought a piece of farmland as investment. And during the real estate bubble, we actually had the opportunity to sell it at a pretty significant gain. And I'd always had an interest in starting my own business, and at that point, essentially, it became financially possible. At that time, I was working full-time as an electronics engineer over at Appetize. And in that role, I was supporting manufacturing over in Asia. So a lot of times, they're shifted 12, 13 hours in time. So a lot of times, I was working a full-time job during the day. Come home, I'd be doing calls with them in the evening, conference calls and such, traveling over there, and so I was extremely busy, and then I was trying to open this business on top of it. But it was the right time for me. The company culture at Lexus was changing at the time, and it wasn't something that I felt comfortable with. And having the finances to be able to go off on my own, I thought it was a great time. But I didn't know what to do, and so I had an interest in franchising because there's proven systems, greater chances of success, I felt. And basically, I didn't have a lot of managerial experience. In fact, I barely had any. And I had a gut feeling at that time that something like an Asian franchise restaurant would do well. It seemed like, to me, I think restaurants were a huge trend that was really popular. And Mexican restaurants were kind of peaking at that time. It seemed like every other restaurant that opened up was Mexican. And I certainly felt that there was an opportunity with Asian restaurants. But I still kept my mind open. We worked with some, I call them franchise headhunters, but basically franchise placement firms, companies or people that are hired by franchises to represent their company to try to sell them. And they had suggested different things, and I still kept looking at my own. Eventually I came across the Hoo-Ha concept and took and visited the one in Sioux Falls and fell in love with it and knew that's what I wanted to do. At that point I had a huge gap, as I mentioned, managerial experience. I knew that that was probably going to have to be something that needed to be bridged in order to get some sort of financing. And so I basically took a class at Fox Valley Technical College called the EC class. And during that class, I actually wrote a business plan, which helped to validate that gut feeling that I had and made me feel more confident that the Hoo-Ha concept would do well. At that point, basically I had a business plan in place. Went out and sought financing. I got my brother and sister to commit some money into the project. I wanted to do some debt financing, so I went out with my business plan to 5 different lenders. And regardless if they gave me an offer or not, they all were really impressed with the business plan, but only 2 banks came back with offers. And basically signed up with one of them and proceeded down the path. And by February 2006, we actually had our first restaurant open. At that point, you're just emotionally and physically drained. I'm still working a full-time job besides that. And just opening a restaurant in general, even later on when we had a full staff of people, it's a huge amount of work and time investment. And so we opened the doors, and this is February 2006. We opened the doors, and a huge snowstorm hits, probably the worst one of the decade. One of those ones that drops 18 to 24 inches of snow, and then to follow that up, within a day after that, the weather dropped to sub-zero temperatures. So basically, our business plan, we projected to serve about 300 guests per day, and basically we were lucky to even 100 after a few days. So at that point, our stomachs started dropping. I had spent a great deal of my inheritance and my investment on this opportunity, just panicking, just the most empty feeling in the world, thinking that I had made maybe the worst investment decision. But eventually we kind of dug deep, prayed, and we created an advertising plan, and we proceeded with that, and things slowly kind of went forward and grew. Meanwhile, during that whole time frame at Plexus, I had actually changed job roles as well. So now I'm trying to learn a new job, plus I'm trying to start the business. And so often I was working over 100 hours a week, and I had a young family at the time too. I had a 2 or 3-year-old daughter. So fortunately, by October of 2006, about 7 months after we opened our doors, I was able to, the company was doing well enough, for the Appleton restaurant was doing well enough, that I was able to quit my full-time job and basically work full-time with Hoo-Ha. And that certainly helped out. It helped me be able to focus on the company, get my head in the game a lot better. So we were able to grow our top line a lot better. I was able to cut costs quite a bit, and so we were able to grow our bottom line quite a bit. At the start of 2007, we basically decided that we wanted to start expanding. So this was the first step beyond our original business plan. And so went back to the franchise and purchased an area development agreement, which is basically with a franchise that gives you, locks up a whole area where you can open multiple different locations. And so we basically had secured that with them, to open 5 more locations in Wisconsin, with the plan that we would open a location in Green Bay next. And so by October of that year, we had opened our Green Bay location. About summer of that year, we also opened our corporate office. At that time, it was about 200 square feet. So, and we had 2 people working there, myself and someone else. So, we're literally working in a closet, for an office. And then a huge step that I took in 2008 is I enrolled in a class at Fox Valley Tech called the Proceed class. And it was a class meant for entrepreneurs who had an existing business and they wanted to take it to the next step. And through that class, it basically helped me, pull me out of the technician role and managerial role. As an entrepreneur, you often get stuck just doing the day-to-day work and stuff. And it pulled me out of that and pulled me back into more of an entrepreneurial role and starting to think more about the vision and strategy of the corporation. And was able to develop a vision. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And basically, up until then, it was kind of a chicken and egg situation. Like, I knew I needed help, but I didn't want to pay for that help, or we didn't think we had the money to pay for that help, because we weren't large enough yet. But we, through taking the class, realized, we needed to just take a step off that ledge. And so we hired a regional manager who took over most of my duties. And basically that allowed me to get more into an entrepreneurial role. And through that, I was able to focus on the right things with growing a business, while he was able to do a lot of these day-to-day tasks. And that's really what kind of started our growth. And from that point on, we opened in Madison, December 2008. In October 2009, we opened Kenosha. And then we opened 3 stores within a 9-month period, 2010 to 2011. So, I mean, literally you can be able to open a store, you can be on the road for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, usually. So, I mean, for 9 months, I mean, basically around the road quite a bit. The business continued to do well, and basically determined, you know, that it wasn't, the market conditions had changed. We felt like the costs were increasing quite a bit. And as you guys are probably familiar, you know, restaurant, there's a lot of price sensitivity with restaurants right now. Basically over the last decade, I mean, since being, you know, since the start of the previous decade, I mean, people are paying $10 for a meal at Applebee's. But you can still go to Applebee's and get a $10 meal. And the way they accomplished it is they were able to shrink portions. That concept didn't seem like it was able to support that model. So we basically felt our prices at a ceiling, our costs were continuing to rise, and kind of felt like, you know, that was a good opportunity. It was the right time to sell. So. I guess just some initial thoughts I had, you know, on stuff that helped us to succeed and along the way here. One thing I think that definitely helped us being persistent. I was told multiple times during the business planning process that, you know, we weren't going to be able to do what we wanted to. At one point, I was calling around to different franchisees and just getting their input and you know, trying to develop more information and do some due diligence to try to figure out more about the hoo-ha concept and what made them successful. And I asked the guy who owned most of the hoo-has at the time, you know, what took him to succeed, and basically he said, well, I mean, he was real blunt about it. He pretty much said, well, what do you do for a day job? And I said, well, I'm an engineer. He said, well, you know what, I'm a restaurateur, and I've got a couple other partners, and we each have decades of experience. And you know what, I wouldn't come to your job as an engineer and expect to be able to do it tomorrow, so you know what, I don't think you can open a restaurant. There was another time too where I had presented to a group before we opened and shared my business plan, and someone was digging through it and they basically took the projections out, sales projections, and kind of backed them down mentally to the fact that we were planning serving about 300 guests per day. And he kind of, you know, said, well, you know, that seems really optimistic. And again, our Appleton locations at peak served over 660 guests per day, so over 2 times that many. But even along the way, you know, getting insurance was difficult. No one wanted to work with a startup, or even finding the right real estate. Landlords didn't want to commit to us at all. Banks didn't want to commit to us. Even though we had a great deal of collateral and such, they didn't want to commit to us. And you know, later on, I even was working in a restaurant as a manager, and had landlords come up to me and actually apologize and say, you know what, I wish I would have gone with you and selected, you know, you to be in our center, because I mean, it's a great concept and we really hit big time. It's something that comes up kind of in the core values that I think is really important too, is just continually growing. And especially I think that's important, you know, particularly with your generation. I mean, just information is a commodity now. You know, it used to be that you had to go to college to get a degree to learn about something, but now, I mean, you can open up the internet and just be able to parse your information so quickly and get something. Essentially, you start a concept, your competitors are going to know what you're doing within days. You know, that information's out there. So you got to be able to continuously grow and learn. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, you probably heard this, it's a lot of work. You know, I kind of talked about how I had multiple jobs, and that's kind of like if you guys as students wanted to start something right now. I mean, basically, school is a full-time job for you. So there was a lot of times where, you know, you had to do what took to be done. You had to do whatever it took for the job to be done. You know, as a manager, or you know, even as the owner, you know, there was a lot of times where I was getting called at midnight because there was an alarm that went off, or you know, I'd be working 100 hours a week or whatever. Finally get home and get a phone call that the toilet broke or whatnot. And at that point, you don't have the funds available to go out and call a plumber, you know, at $200 an hour at an emergency rate on a Friday night. So you head over there and you fix it and do whatever it takes to get it done. But at the same time, too, you have to remain that entrepreneurial role. You know, it's so easy wrapped up in those day-to-day tasks. And number one, I think, most important thing, and like I kind of mentioned, the thing that really was impetus for our growth halfway through our business ownership, was basically having a vision. And when I say have a vision, basically, you should be able to close your eyes. You should be able to visualize what you want, the thing you're working on to live with. You should be able to visualize what the product looks like, what the product is. You should be able to visualize what your customers look like, how many you have, what do they physically look like, what does their face look like? Do they have smiles on their faces when they're working with you? You should be able to visualize your locations. Where are they at? What do they look like? The number of employees you have, you should be able to visualize what your employees look like. Again, do they have smiles on their faces when they're working for you? So you should be able to have that vision of what you want your company to look like. Because once you have that, then you can do the strategic side and develop a plan. Or you can do the more tactical side of developing a plan that helps you to reach that goal. Your vision should definitely be something that's lofty and memorable, and something that's huge too is it needs to play into your personal goals. A lot of people start a business and they start the business and they don't have really set idea of how that business can play into their goals, and so they end up working 80 hours a week or whatnot. And it doesn't really fit into personal goals. Why are you starting a business if it's not meeting your personal goals? So some of the benefits of having a vision is, when you have employees, it can induce excitement, not only into yourself, but also into employees. So it can be something that's motivating, and by doing that, it can inspire loyalty. It also displays culture, and it also sets direction and purpose for your organization. And when you have the direction, you have goals, and those goals drive your organization. And basically, you're not going to have a growing organization unless you're driven. So, I don't know if you have any questions at all, but again, I certainly wanted to thank you guys for coming here tonight. I think it's really great that you're here doing it again, that you're pursuing your entrepreneurial interest. Owning your own company may not be something that happens today or tomorrow, but certainly in the meantime, it's something that's going to help the companies you work for, that entrepreneurial spirit. That's what really has made our country the great country that it is. And again, small business is really the driver of our economy. So. Questions?
What are you interested in doing next, and is it something other than a restaurant?
Yeah, I've been looking at different opportunities, but different entrepreneurial opportunities. I've also just recently been hired to teach at the Appetize Tech, doing that EC class, teaching the EC class that I basically took originally to create business plan. So it gives me a chance to get back and share some experiences I've had, some learnings I've had with others. Yeah.
So what is Appetize exactly? I'm just kind of trying to piece together. It says you started Appetize and then you opened Food Hot Mongolian Grill.
Yeah.
So is Appetize just like a restaurant employing organization, or what is that exactly?
So Huhat is a franchise. So basically, we had franchised the rights for 7 different locations that we opened. So Appetize is the name of the company that we own, and we did business as Huhat. So when we pay taxes and such, we don't pay it as Huhat. We basically pay it as Appetize. And when we pay our employees, Appetize is what shows up on the paychecks. But all our guests recognize us, and our face of our business is Huhat. Yeah.
Since you first talked to the guy that said you're not going to be able to do this business because you don't have these screens, have you ever talked to him again and said, I was successful?
Actually, the franchisor kind of used us quite frequently when he worked with prospective franchisees, because there was a lot of other franchisees outside the industry. But for a number of years, I was on the marketing committee, and at franchise conferences, I saw this guy regularly. We ended up being pretty close friends, and I definitely get information from him at times, but he definitely would ask me for stuff too. So success was payback in itself, I guess. Okay.
What kind of advice would you give, if anybody here wanted to open up a restaurant or a franchise or something?
Well, I think franchising is a great way to start from the perspective, again, that you have a proven business model that you can take a look at and see the characteristics. I could take a look at Huhat and say, well, Huhat did succeed. At that time it was a lot smaller. I think they only have about 40 locations even now, but back then maybe they had a dozen locations. But I can basically say, these dozen locations are located in these sort of cities. These are what these cities look like, and they're very similar to Appleton. So franchising is a great way to go from that perspective. It gives you a model that you can start with. And kind of one of our core values you saw there too was to systemize. And basically when you look at a franchise is a system. You're basically buying the rights to a system that you know works. But, you know, because they were a young organization, we had to create a lot of our own systems. And we created a lot of our own systems, honestly, that were probably more in depth and more detailed and stronger than what they had. But beyond that, you know, I think the biggest thing too is just have a vision, like I said, for your, you know, vision for the item that you want to create, what it looks like. Because once you have that in place, you can go out, you're going to be motivated to do it. You know, even the last couple of days I've been painting my house and just having a vision of, you know, this is what it's going to look like. I mean, that inspired me to do it. I mean, painting's, you know, kind of crappy work, right? But it gave me the vision, you know, it gave me the strength and the motivation to get it done, so.
What is the biggest thing you struggle with as an entrepreneur? And it can be anything, it could be before you're an entrepreneur, while you're currently an entrepreneur. What's the biggest thing you struggle with just in general?
The number one biggest challenge definitely is employees when you're an entrepreneur. You know, it's also it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's also the greatest thing about being an entrepreneur too. But I mean, when you have this vision and you're trying to sell it to people and getting them to do what you want them to do, I mean, it's just difficult. I mean, look at like religion, for example. I mean, that's essentially what religion is trying to do. There's books, you know, the Bible, the Quran, whatever, you know, they're basically trying to tell people what to do and the values and, you know, vision of what they want people's lives to look like. And people, I mean, there's billions of people and they can't merge into one, you know, into one thing. You know, and now as an entrepreneur, you're trying to do that essentially too. You have a vision for what you want your company to look like and what these employees are supposed to be doing. And you're trying to align them, you know, to get the job done the way that you want to see them to do it, you know. And obviously, when you have 400 employees, you can't be doing every single job yourself. I mean, certainly the saying that, you know, if you want to get a job done right, you do it yourself. I mean, that's certainly true, but you can't do that and have a successful company either with employees. So, definitely the biggest challenge. Yeah.
What was it like on a daily basis when you were with Appetize? Did you go like from restaurant to restaurant and look over operations, or were you like thinking of new restaurants to open, or what were you doing?
It varied quite a bit, but when we got to the point where we had a regional management team in place, they were actually the ones going on a daily basis from restaurant to restaurant, overseeing the operations. So at that point, a lot of my focus was on actual growth. So it was finding new locations, negotiating deals, you know, working on higher level issues if there's issues with landlords or legal issues or whatnot, dealing with all sorts of issues, dealing with accounting, the financial planning for the business, creating actual projections and stuff. And then also developing that high level vision. You know, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to grow, this is where we're going to grow to. And relaying that to the employees and getting everyone on board with that. Again, that's what's the hardest task. So, you know, meeting with the employees, meeting with these high level management people on a daily basis, you know, or maybe one person's one day and another person's a different day, and trying to align your vision with theirs and trying to see, you know, measure the results and give them the feedback that they need and getting them on board. So, I mean, it was constant communication. So,
I have one last question, I'm sorry.
Yep.
This is personal. I went through EC2, and would you recommend EC to students like this? If they have an idea, if they want to maybe validate it a little bit more and make that small investment to go through the EC course, would you recommend that to these students?
yeah, I definitely would. I mean, I'm not sure how that plays into the classes you take now, or you know, the classes you take now, they teach you any of those skills. But back when I took it, I mean, basically walked you through the process of creating a business plan. And I think the other benefit of going through that class, or what, you know, even being a part of this group, it developed just a lot of confidence. I mean, going into starting a business, you know, I was really scared. I mean, business owners seemed like it was kind of a scary thing to me. But then being in a classroom full of other people that were kind of in the same boat and looking around saying, hey, this guy's like me and this guy's like me. And, I mean, it really gave me a lot of confidence. And so, you know, whether you do that or even just continue being in this group, I think either way, I mean, just see other people like yourself succeeding and doing this stuff. I mean, it really breaks down that barrier that's mystical.
Any other questions at all, guys? Well, can we give David a big thank you here real quick?